You're becoming a burden, Mom. Those 5 words hung in the air like poison. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd share. And if you, for even a second, feel like this sounds familiar, please just leave a like and subscribe. It'll help me keep opening my heart like this. My name is Eleanor, and at 73 years old, I thought I knew what loneliness felt like. I was wrong. Real loneliness isn't being alone. It's being surrounded by the people you love most, and realizing they see you as nothing more than an inconvenience wrapped in aging skin. I was standing in my kitchen in Chicago, wearing the same floral apron I'd worn for 20 years, my arthritic hands trembling as I gripped the granite countertop my late husband Richard had installed before the cancer took him. The smell of pot roast filled the house, the same recipe I'd made every Sunday for 35 years, the one my son Michael used to beg for when he was 8 years old, standing on a step stool beside me, flour in his dark hair. But that Sunday, Michael sat at my dining table like he was attending a business meeting. His wife Jessica scrolled through her phone, occasionally showing their 15-year-old daughter Sophia some social media post that made them both laugh, a sound that felt like music from another room. Beautiful, but unreachable. "Mom," Michael said, cutting through my thoughts. "We need to talk." I knew that tone. It was the same one he'd used when he told me they couldn't visit for Christmas because Jessica's family had prior commitments. The same tone when he explained why they couldn't take me to my doctor's appointments anymore because their schedules were just too packed. "Of course, honey," I said, wiping my hands on the apron that suddenly felt too tight around my waist. "Let me just serve dinner first." "Actually," Jessica interrupted without looking up from her phone, "we can't stay long. Sophia has a study group." Sophia rolled her eyes. "It's not a study group, Mom. It's a party." "Same thing," Jessica muttered. I stood there, surrounded by the aroma of the meal I'd spent 3 hours preparing, watching my granddaughter, the little girl who used to call me Grammy and beg for bedtime stories, treat me like I was invisible. When was the last time she'd hugged me? When was the last time any of them had really looked at me? Not through me or around me, but at me. "Sit down, Mom," Michael said, and something in his voice made my chest tighten. I lowered myself into the chair across from him, the same chair where I'd helped him with homework, where I'd listened to him cry about his first heartbreak, where I'd celebrated every promotion and milestone, the chair where, just 2 years ago, I'd handed him the envelope containing the deed to the house, my house, because he'd convinced me it would be easier for tax purposes if everything was already in his name. "We've been thinking," Michael began, glancing at Jessica, who finally put down her phone, "about your living situation." My living situation? The words felt foreign in my mouth. "You're getting older, Mom. You fell last month." "I tripped over the garden hose," I interrupted. "It wasn't a fall. You forgot to turn off the stove twice last week," Jessica added, her voice carrying that particular brand of impatience reserved for children and the elderly. "The smoke alarm woke up the whole neighborhood." I was distracted. I was helping Sophia with her college applications, which she didn't ask for, Sophia mumbled, not looking up from her phone. The words hit me like a slap. I had spent hours researching scholarships, printing applications, organizing documents in color-coded folders. I thought I was being helpful. I thought she wanted my help. "The point is," Michael continued, reaching into his briefcase, "when had family conversations started requiring briefcases? We found a wonderful place, Sunset Manor. It's got everything you need, 24-hour care, activities, other people your age to socialize with." He slid a glossy brochure across the table. On the cover, an elderly woman with perfectly styled silver hair smiled while playing cards with 3 other residents, all of them looking like they'd never experienced a moment of sadness or abandonment in their lives. "I don't need 24-hour care," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. "I need my family." "You'll have your family," Jessica said, but she was already checking her watch. "We'll visit all the time." "Like you visit now?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Sophia looked up from her phone. "That's not fair, Mom," Michael said, but he couldn't meet my eyes. "We're busy. The practice is demanding. Sophia's in her senior year. We have our own lives." "I know you do," I whispered, feeling something crack inside my chest. "I just thought I thought I was still part of those lives. You are, he said, but the words sounded rehearsed. This way you'll be safe. You'll have people around all the time. Strangers, I said. Mom, you're becoming a burden. There they were, the 5 words that shattered everything I thought I knew about my place in this world. Michael immediately looked stricken, like he hadn't meant to be so blunt. But Jessica nodded in agreement, and Sophia, my granddaughter, my little girl who I'd rocked to sleep and sung lullabies to, just shrugged like it was an obvious truth everyone had been tiptoeing around. I mean, Michael backtracked. Not a burden exactly, but... No, I said, standing up so quickly my chair scraped against the hardwood floor. You said what you meant. I walked to the kitchen window and stared out at the garden Richard and I had planted together. The roses he'd given me for our 25th anniversary still bloomed every spring. The apple tree where Michael had built his first treehouse still provided shade. This house held 40 years of my life, and now it belonged to a son who thought I was a burden. The dinner's ready, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. You should eat before you go. But when I turned around, they were already gathering their things. We really can't stay, Mom, Michael said, kissing my cheek like he always did, a gesture that used to comfort me, but now felt like a cruel mimicry of affection. Think about the brochure, okay? We'll talk more next week. And then they were gone. I stood in my empty house, surrounded by the smell of pot roast and the sound of my own heartbeat, and realized that somewhere along the way, I had become a stranger in my own life. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I sat at my kitchen table, still wearing the floral apron, and stared at the brochure. In the margins, Jessica had already written notes. Private room, $4,800 month. Waiting list, only 6 weeks. They'd already called. They'd already planned. They'd already decided. I was just the last to know. The house felt different that night. Not empty. It had been empty for years, really, but hollow. Like the walls themselves had absorbed my son's words and were now echoing them back at me. Burden, burden, burden. I found myself standing in Michael's old bedroom, a space I'd preserved like a shrine to a boy who no longer existed. His high school football trophies still lined the shelves, gathering dust. The bed was still made with the same Chicago Bears comforter he'd begged for when he was 12. On his desk, a photo of us at his graduation from medical school, both of us beaming, my arm around his shoulders, his diploma held high between us like a victory flag. I remembered that day so clearly. How proud I'd been, standing in that crowd of families, knowing that everything, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every penny saved, had led to that moment. The memories came flooding back, uninvited, but unstoppable. Michael was 6 when Richard died. A heart attack at 38. Sudden, devastating, leaving me a widow with a mortgage, a child, and a part-time job at the local library that barely covered groceries. I remember sitting at this very desk, surrounded by bills I couldn't pay, while Michael slept in the next room, unaware that our world had collapsed overnight. Mommy, he'd whispered one night, crawling into my bed after another nightmare. Are we going to be okay? Always, I'd promised, stroking his dark hair. Mommy will always take care of you. And I did. God help me, I did. I worked 3 jobs to keep us in this house. Library assistant during the day, cleaning offices at night, and weekend shifts at Miller's Grocery on the south side of town. My hands were permanently cracked from bleach and cold. My back ached from mopping floors and stocking shelves. But Michael never knew. He never saw me counting pennies at the kitchen table after he went to bed. Never knew that I wore the same 3 dresses to work because I couldn't afford new clothes. When he wanted to play Little League, I found the registration fee in the couch cushions. Literally. $25 in quarters and crumpled bills that I'd been saving for 2 months. I hemmed his uniform pants myself because the smallest size was still too big. My fingers pricked and bleeding from the needle as I worked by lamplight after my cleaning shift. You look perfect, sweetheart, I'd told him that first game, adjusting his cap with hands that smelled like industrial floor cleaner despite 3 washings. He'd hugged me so tight that day. Thanks, Mom. You're the best mom in the whole world. I held on to that feeling for years. When he was 14, he desperately wanted a bike for his birthday. Not just any bike, but the red Schwinn in Morrison's bike shop window. It cost $140. I had $37 to my name, so I sold my engagement ring. The same ring Richard had saved for 6 months to buy, working double shifts at the factory. The ring he'd proposed with on Navy Pier, down on one knee, while tourists and locals walked by, some stopping to clap when I said yes. The ring that had been the only beautiful thing I owned, the only physical reminder of the man who'd loved me completely. I took it to Cash and Gold on Clark Street on a rainy Tuesday morning. The man behind the counter barely looked at it. $40, he said, not even using a magnifying glass. But it's real gold, I protested. The diamond, $40. Take it or leave it. I took it. And I borrowed the rest from my sister Margaret, who lectured me for an hour about spoiling that boy and teaching him the value of money. But I'll never forget Michael's face when he saw that bike on his birthday. Pure joy, the kind of happiness that made every sacrifice feel like a privilege instead of a burden. Mom, it's the one from the window. How did you— Happy birthday, sweetheart, I'd said, blinking back tears. You deserve everything good in this world. He'd ridden that bike everywhere for 3 years, until he outgrew it. Then he'd casually mentioned wanting a car for his 17th birthday. Like the bike had never existed. The college years were the hardest. Michael got into Northwestern, his dream school. But even with his partial academic scholarship, the costs were staggering. Tuition, room and board, books, living expenses. Numbers that made my head spin and my chest tighten with panic. I could go to community college first, he'd offered. But I could see the disappointment in his eyes. Save money for the first 2 years. Absolutely not, I'd said, with more confidence than I felt. You earned this. We'll make it work. We. As if he had any idea what making it work actually meant. I took out a second mortgage on the house, borrowed against my meager retirement savings, picked up a 4th job cleaning apartments on weekends. For 4 years, I lived on peanut butter sandwiches and instant coffee, wore shoes with holes in the soles, and drove a car that broke down so often I kept jumper cables in my purse. Every month I sent him money for emergencies. Textbooks that cost $300, lab fees, social events he didn't want to miss. When he called to say his laptop had crashed and he needed a new one immediately, I sold my grandmother's china set to buy him a MacBook. You're amazing, Mom, he'd said over the phone, and I'd cried with relief that he was happy. Medical school was even worse. Another 4 years of crippling expenses. I refinanced the house again, this time at a rate that made the bank officer wince with sympathy. My credit cards were maxed out. I shopped exclusively at thrift stores and food pantries. The heating bill became a luxury I couldn't afford. I spent winters wearing coats indoors and sleeping under every blanket I owned. But Michael was going to be a doctor. My son, the doctor. The boy whose father had died before seeing him graduate kindergarten was going to save lives. Every shiver, every skipped meal, every humiliation was worth it. The day he graduated medical school, he introduced me to Jessica. Mom, this is Jessica, he'd said, his arm around a blonde woman in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly income. We've been dating for 6 months. 6 months. He'd been seeing someone for 6 months and never mentioned her. But I smiled and shook her hand and pretended my heart wasn't breaking just a little bit more. It's so nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Miller, Jessica had said, her voice pleasant but distant. Michael talks about you all the time. But even then, I could see it in her eyes. The assessment, the way she took in my worn dress, my drugstore makeup, my hands that showed every year of manual labor. I wasn't what she'd expected for the mother of a doctor. They got married 2 years later. I'd saved for months to buy Jessica a proper wedding gift, a crystal vase from Macy's that cleaned out what little remained in my savings account. She'd opened it at the bridal shower, smiled politely, and set it aside without a second glance. Oh, how practical, her mother had whispered to the woman next to her, loud enough for me to hear. I'd sat in the back row at their wedding, wearing a dress I'd borrowed from Margaret, watching my son promise to love and honor a woman who'd made it clear I wasn't welcome in their new life. During the father-daughter dance, Jessica's father had twirled her around the dance floor while I sat alone at a table in the corner, remembering all the times I'd danced with Michael in our kitchen when he was little, standing on my feet while music played from the old radio on the counter. After Sophia was born, things got worse. Suddenly, I wasn't just Michael's mother. I was the poor grandmother. The one who brought handmade gifts to birthday parties full of expensive toys. The one who offered to babysit but was told they preferred professional childcare. The one who was invited to family gatherings but seated at the kids' table because the adult conversations were too sophisticated. And through it all, Michael said nothing. My son, who I'd sacrificed everything for, watched his wife diminish me and stayed silent. The final blow had come 3 years ago, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I'd called Michael from the doctor's office, my hands shaking as I held the phone. Mom, what's wrong? I just got some test results back, honey. It's cancer, breast cancer, but they caught it early, so... Oh no. Mom, I'm so sorry. Listen, I'm in surgery all day, but I'll call you tonight, okay? We'll figure this out. He called the next week. After I'd already scheduled my surgery, found a ride to the hospital, and arranged for a neighbor to check on me during recovery. How are you feeling? He'd asked. And I could hear Jessica talking in the background about dinner reservations. I'm okay, I'd lied. Because what else could I say? That I'd spent 6 months going through chemotherapy alone? That I'd lost my hair and 20 pounds and nearly died from an infection because I was too proud to call and admit how scared I was? That's great, Mom. You're so strong. Listen, we're running late, but I'm glad you're doing well. 6 months of hell, and he'd called twice. Now, standing in his childhood bedroom, surrounded by the remnants of the boy I'd raised and loved and sacrificed everything for, I finally understood the truth. I hadn't raised a son. I'd raised a stranger who happened to share my DNA, and tomorrow, I would have to decide whether to let him erase the last traces of the woman who'd given him everything, just so he could clear his conscience and move on with his life. Was I used? The question whispered through my mind like poison. Yes, I was used. Completely. Thoroughly, and I'd been so desperate for his love that I'd let it happen. But tonight, for the first time in 40 years, I was finally getting angry. The anger lasted exactly one night. By morning, I was back to making excuses for them. Maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was becoming forgetful, difficult, burdensome. Maybe this was just what happened when you got old. You became inconvenient. I spent the next week pretending everything was normal, calling Michael daily like I always did. But something had shifted. I began noticing things I'd been blind to before, like how he never asked how I was feeling, only if I'd thought about the brochure. How Jessica answered his phone sometimes and told me he was unavailable, even when I could hear him laughing in the background. The cruelties were small, surgical, death by 1,000 paper cuts. Like when I mentioned that my arthritis had been acting up, and Jessica suggested I try walking more while scrolling through her phone. Or when I brought homemade cookies to Sophia's soccer game and watched her friends politely refuse them while she pretended not to know who I was. Who's the old lady? I heard one girl ask. Nobody important, Sophia had mumbled, not meeting my eyes. I sat in my car afterward and ate those cookies myself, each bite tasting like rejection. The worst part was the birthdays. Oh God, the birthdays. Mine had been 3 weeks ago, 73 years old. I'd woken up early, showered, put on my nicest dress, the navy blue one with tiny flowers that Richard always said brought out my eyes. I'd made myself a small cake, chocolate with vanilla frosting, and set it on the kitchen table with a single candle. I waited. The phone never rang. At 6 p.m., I called Michael myself. Oh, Mom, happy birthday. His voice was bright, surprised, guilty. God, I'm sorry. We've been swamped with Sophia's college prep and Jessica's mom is visiting and... It's okay, honey, I'd said, staring at my unlit candle. I know you're busy. We'll make it up to you, I promise. Maybe dinner next week? Next week became the week after. Then the week after that. Now it was almost a month later. And we still hadn't celebrated. But I'd noticed on Facebook, because yes, I have Facebook, despite what they think, that they'd thrown an elaborate surprise party for Jessica's mother that same weekend. professional catering, string quartet, 50 guests. Meanwhile, I'd eaten gas station sushi alone while watching reruns of old movies. But even that wasn't the breaking point. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon when I wasn't supposed to be at Michael's house. I'd driven over to drop off the apple pie I'd made for Sophia's school bake sale. The front door was unlocked, so I let myself in with the key they'd given me, for emergencies only. I could hear voices coming from the kitchen. Jessica, her sister Rachel, and her mother, Patricia. I was about to call out when I heard my name. Honestly, don't know what Michael was thinking, Jessica was saying. She shows up here every weekend expecting us to entertain her. And the way she dresses. That floral apron looks like something from a nursing home gift shop. My hand froze on the doorknob. She's just lonely, Rachel said, but not in a sympathetic way. More like she was stating an obvious fact. Though I have to say, the constant phone calls would drive me insane. 3 times yesterday, Jessica continued. 3. Once to ask if Michael wanted her to pick up his dry cleaning, like he's still 12 years old. Once to tell us about some sale at the grocery store we'd never shop at anyway. And once just to chat for 45 minutes about her neighbor's cat. They all laughed. Actually, laughed. The worst part, Patricia chimed in, is how she acts like she's entitled to be included in everything. The Disney trip, family dinners, even Sophia's friends' birthday parties. It's like she doesn't understand that she's not the center of the universe anymore. Michael feels guilty, you know, Jessica said, lowering her voice, because of how much she sacrificed when he was growing up. But that was her choice. Nobody forced her to work 3 jobs or sell her jewelry or whatever sob story she tells. That's what parents do. You don't get a medal for it. My legs gave out. I had to grab the door frame to keep from falling. The nursing home thing is actually perfect, Rachel said. She'll have people her own age to talk to about their medications and their aches and pains. Honestly, it's probably the kindest thing you could do for her. Plus, Patricia added, think about your property values. Having an elderly woman shuffling around the neighborhood in those old lady clothes, it doesn't exactly scream upscale community. More laughter. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. I made it to my car somehow, drove 3 blocks before I had to pull over and throw up in someone's front yard. That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I kept replaying their words, their laughter, the casual cruelty of people discussing your disposal like you were outdated furniture. That was her choice. You don't get a medal for it. It's probably the kindest thing you could do for her. I found myself standing in front of my bathroom mirror at 3 a.m., staring at a woman I barely recognized. When had my hair gotten so thin? When had these lines carved themselves so deeply around my eyes? When had I started looking like someone's burden instead of someone's mother? You're pathetic, I whispered to my reflection. Absolutely pathetic. But even then, even after hearing them mock me like I was some kind of charity case, I couldn't quite let go. The next morning, I called Michael like always. Hi, honey. How's your day going? Busy, Mom. What do you need? Not, how are you? Not, good to hear from you. What do you need? Like I was a customer service call he needed to handle efficiently. I was just calling to say hello, and I made that apple pie for Sophia's bake sale. Mom, you didn't need to do that. Jessica already bought something from the fancy bakery downtown. Oh, I felt stupid. Unnecessary. Well, maybe you could take it to work? Your colleagues always said they enjoyed my baking. That was years ago, Mom. Most of them are on special diets now. Low carb, gluten-free, that kind of thing. Of course they were. Everything I offered was outdated, unwanted, insufficient. Right, of course. I'll freeze it. Good idea. Listen, I've got to run. Patient calls. Michael? Yeah? Do you think I call too much? The pause was too long. Way too long. No, Mom, it's fine. I'm really busy these days. I know. I just miss talking to you. Sometimes I feel like, Mom, I really do have to go. We'll talk later, okay? The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, wondering when "we'll talk later" had become his way of saying, please stop calling me. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I drove to Michael's office. The reception area was all marble and leather, with abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than my annual income. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and a voice like velvet, smiled at me with professional courtesy. "I'm here to see Dr. Miller," I said. "I'm his mother." Her smile faltered slightly. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, I wanted to surprise him. Maybe take him to lunch." "I'm sorry, but Dr. Miller doesn't see walk-ins. His schedule is completely full today. Would you like me to have him call you? Could you just tell him I'm here? I'll only take a minute." "I'm sorry, but I really can't interrupt him when he's with patients." I stood there for a moment, feeling every bit the out-of-place old woman in my Walmart dress and drugstore shoes. Behind the receptionist, I could see into the break room where Michael sat laughing with two colleagues, a sandwich from some expensive deli in front of him. He saw me. Our eyes met across the office space. He looked away, actually looked away, like I was a stranger. Then he said something to his colleagues that made them all laugh again, and I realized with crystal clarity that I was the joke, the embarrassing mother, the obligation he had to manage. I left without another word. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that had long since gone cold, staring at the Sunset Manor brochure. The smiling elderly people on the cover seemed to mock me with their apparent contentment. Was this really what I'd earned after 73 years of life? After raising a son single-handedly? After sacrificing everything for his education, his success, his happiness? A room in a facility where I'd be shuffled off to die quietly, conveniently, without bothering anyone anymore? I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. The list was pitifully short. A few neighbors I barely knew, my doctor's office, the grocery store pharmacy, my sister Margaret who lived in Florida and called twice a year out of obligation. No friends, no one who would miss me if I disappeared tomorrow. When had I become so completely alone? Was I used? The question I'd been avoiding finally demanded an answer. Yes, I was used. I was used completely, systematically, and thoroughly. And the worst part? I'd trained them to use me. I'd made myself so available, so eager to please, so desperate for their love, that I'd taught them my needs didn't matter. I'd taught my own son that I was disposable. But sitting there in my empty kitchen, surrounded by 40 years of memories and sacrifice, I made a decision. Tomorrow I was going to find out exactly how much I meant to them, and then I was going to disappear. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 40 years. I didn't call Michael. It felt strange, sitting at my kitchen table with my coffee, watching the clock tick past 8 a.m. without reaching for the phone. For decades, our morning call had been as routine as breathing. I'd ask about his day, remind him about appointments he'd forgotten, listen to him complain about hospital politics or difficult patients. It was our connection, our ritual, our last thread. But today, I waited. The phone finally rang at 11:30 a.m. "Mom? You didn't call this morning. Is everything okay?" There it was. Not concern for my well-being. Concern for the disruption of routine. Like a pet that hadn't shown up for feeding. "I'm fine, honey," I said, keeping my voice light. "Just had a busy morning." "Busy?" He sounded genuinely confused, like the concept of me having a life outside of waiting for his calls was incomprehensible. "Doing what?" "Oh, this and that. How are you?" "I'm fine. Listen, Jessica wanted me to ask. Did you think any more about the Sunset Manor brochure? They have an opening coming up next month, but we need to put down a deposit soon if you're interested." Interested. Like I was shopping for a vacation rental instead of signing away my independence. "Actually, Michael, I've been thinking about something else entirely." "What's that?" I took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about selling the house." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Selling the house?" His voice cracked like a teenager's. "What are you talking about? That's our house. I mean, your house. But it's been in the family for 40 years, I finished, since your father and I bought it. But it's too big for one person now, don't you think? All these empty rooms, all these memories. But where would you go?" There it was. The panic. Not because he was worried about me, but because he'd counted on that house. Counted on inheriting it, selling it, using the equity for his own family's future. Jessica had probably already mentally redecorated the master bedroom. I'm not sure yet. I said. Maybe I'll travel. See the world while I still can. Travel? Mom, you hate flying. You get carsick on road trips longer than an hour. What's gotten into you? What's gotten into me? The question hung in the air like an accusation. I guess I'm just realizing that life is short, I said. And I've spent so much of it in service to other people that I've forgotten what I might want for myself. Another long pause. This is about the nursing home, isn't it? Mom, we're not trying to get rid of you. We're trying to help. Are you? I interrupted, surprising us both. Because help usually feels different than this. Different how? Help doesn't come with guilt trips and brochures. Help doesn't require me to disappear quietly so I don't embarrass anyone. You're not embarrassing anyone. Where is this coming from? I almost told him. Almost mentioned the conversation I'd overheard, the laughter, the casual cruelty. But something held me back. Maybe I wanted to see how deep this would go before I played my final card. I should go, I said instead. I have an appointment. An appointment? With who? A real estate agent. I hung up before he could respond. The phone started ringing again immediately. I let it go to voicemail. Then I did something even more radical. I unplugged it entirely. For the first time in decades, my house was truly quiet. I spent the afternoon doing something I hadn't done in years. I explored my own home. Really looked at it, instead of just maintaining it like a museum to other people's memories. In the basement, I found boxes of Michael's things that he'd left behind when he moved out for college. His baseball card collection, comic books, school papers I'd saved because they seemed important at the time, love letters from high school girlfriends whose names I'd forgotten, a journal from when he was 15, full of teenage angst and complaints about how embarrassing I was even then. Mom made me take the bus to school again because her car is making weird noises. So humiliating. I told Jake my mom was sick, so he wouldn't know she couldn't afford to fix it. God, I can't wait to get out of here. I'd been sacrificing for someone who'd been ashamed of me since he was a teenager. In the attic, I found my own forgotten treasures, photo albums from before Michael was born, when Richard and I were young and in love and dreaming about the future. Pictures of me at 25, confident and radiant, wearing a yellow sundress that made me look like sunshine. When had I stopped wearing yellow? When had I started dressing like someone's grandmother instead of someone's woman? I found letters Richard had written me when he was working out of town, passionate and romantic and full of promises about the life we'd build together. A life that had been cut short by a heart attack that took him before he could see his son become a man. And I found something else. A manila envelope with my name on it, in Richard's handwriting. Inside, a life insurance policy I'd forgotten about. A small one, not the big policy that had paid off our debts and funded Michael's education. This one was separate, something Richard had bought just for me. The paperwork was dated 6 months before he died. A note was clipped to the front in his familiar scrawl, "For Eleanor's dreams. Whatever they are, whenever she's ready to chase them. She deserves to be more than just a mother and a widow. She deserves to be herself." The policy was worth $50,000. Not a fortune, but enough. Enough to disappear if I wanted to. Enough to start over somewhere new, where no one knew me as Michael's mother or Richard's widow, where I could just be Eleanor. The landline started ringing downstairs. I'd forgotten about the kitchen extension. I let it ring. At 6 p.m., I heard a car in the driveway, then another. Car doors slamming, voices approaching the front door. Not knocking. Michael still had his key. Mom, where are you?" I stayed in the attic, listening to them search the house. "She's not answering her phone." Jessica's voice drifted up from the kitchen. "Her car's here, so she's got to be somewhere. Maybe she's hurt," Michael said. And for a moment, I heard genuine worry in his voice. "Mom? Please answer if you can hear me." I almost went downstairs then, almost fell back into the familiar pattern of reassuring him, of putting his comfort above my own needs. But I stayed hidden, curious to see what they'd do when they thought I might be gone. "Should we call 911? That was Sophia's voice, my granddaughter sounding actually concerned for once. "Let's check the basement first," Jessica said. "Maybe she fell down the stairs or something." Their footsteps thundered overhead as they searched every room. I heard drawers opening, closets being checked. They were looking for me with an urgency that felt almost like love. Almost. Finally, Michael called up to the attic. "Mom? Are you up there?" I climbed down the ladder slowly, deliberately, holding the manila envelope in my hand. "There you are!" Michael rushed toward me, and for a moment, I thought he might actually hug me. Instead, he stopped short, his relief quickly turning to irritation. "Why didn't you answer when we called? We were worried sick." "I was going through some old things," I said, holding up the envelope, finding treasures I'd forgotten about. "Your phone was unplugged," Jessica said accusingly, like I'd committed a crime. "We thought something terrible had happened." "Something terrible did happen," I said quietly, "but it wasn't today." "What's that supposed to mean?" Michael demanded. I looked at my son, really looked at him. He was handsome, successful, everything I'd hoped he'd become, but there was something missing in his eyes when he looked at me, something that should have been there between a mother and child, but wasn't. Respect. Love that wasn't conditional. Basic human kindness. "I found something today," I said, holding up the insurance policy. "Something your father left for me." Michael's eyes immediately went to the paperwork, calculating. "What is it?" "Freedom," I said simply. "Mom, you're scaring us," Sophia said. And she actually did look scared. When was the last time I'd seen her show any real emotion about me? "There's nothing scary about an old woman finally remembering she has choices," I said. "I'm going to sell the house, Michael. I've already contacted a realtor." "You can't just—" he started, then caught himself. "I mean, that's a big decision. You should think about it more. Maybe we should all sit down and discuss." "We?" I laughed, and the sound surprised me. It was bitter, sharp. "We haven't discussed anything in years. You've told me what you've decided for me, and I've gone along with it. But that stops now." "What do you want?" Jessica asked, exasperated. "We're trying to help you." "I want," I said slowly, savoring each word, "to be treated like a person instead of a problem to be solved." "You are," Michael began. "I want," I continued, "to stop being the family secret you're ashamed of. We're not—" "I want to stop pretending that I don't know you discuss getting rid of me like I'm expired milk taking up space in your refrigerator." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael's face went white. Jessica looked away, guilty. Sophia just stared at me with wide eyes, maybe seeing me as a real person for the first time in years. "You heard," Jessica whispered. "I heard." I looked directly at her. "I heard you laugh about my clothes, my loneliness, my phone calls. I heard you dismiss 40 years of sacrifice as what parents do. I heard you planning my disposal like I was garbage." "Mom, we didn't mean—" Michael started. "Yes, you did," I said firmly. "You meant every word, and now I know exactly where I stand." I walked past them toward the stairs, still holding Richard's gift in my hands. "So here's what's going to happen," I said without turning around. "I'm selling this house. I'm taking your father's gift, and I'm going to live my life. Really live it, for the first time in 40 years. And us?" Michael's voice was small, like a child's. I turned back to look at him one last time. "You'll be fine," I said. "You've been managing without a real mother for years anyway. This just makes it official." That night, for the first time since Richard died, I slept peacefully. Tomorrow, I would start planning my escape. The real estate agent's name was Carmen Rodriguez, and she had the kind of warm, no-nonsense energy that made me feel capable instead of fragile. When she walked through my house that Wednesday morning, she didn't see an old woman's burden. She saw potential. "This is a beautiful home," she said, running her hand along the oak banister Richard had refinished himself. "These vintage details, the original hardwood, that gorgeous kitchen garden visible from every window. Someone is going to fall in love with this place. Someone. Not my family who'd taken it for granted. Not Michael who'd assumed it would simply pass to him when I died. Someone who would actually appreciate what Richard and I had built." "How quickly could it sell?" I asked. "In this market? With this location and these bones? I'd say 6 weeks, maybe 8. Are you thinking of downsizing nearby, or—" "I'm thinking of disappearing," I said, surprising myself with how good it felt to say out loud. Carmen smiled like this wasn't the first time she'd helped someone escape their old life. "Well then, let's get you that fresh start." For the first time in months, I felt something I'd almost forgotten existed: excitement. That afternoon, I did something revolutionary. I drove to Nordstrom, not the department stores I usually shopped in, the discount chains and outlet malls where I'd hunted for bargains while pinching pennies to fund Michael's future. I drove to the actual Nordstrom in downtown Chicago, parked in their garage like I belonged there, and walked into a world I'd only glimpsed from the outside. The personal shopper's name was Diane, a woman about my age with silver hair cut in a chic bob and makeup that made her eyes sparkle. When I told her I needed a complete wardrobe overhaul, everything from underwear to outerwear, she didn't blink. "Honey," she said, "you've come to the right place. Let's find the woman you've been hiding under all that beige." Beige. That's what my life had become. Neutral, invisible, designed not to draw attention or take up space. But when Diane brought me that first dress, a deep emerald green with clean lines that actually fit my body instead of hiding it, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. "Look at your eyes," Diane said softly. "They're the same color as the dress. When's the last time you wore something that brought out your eyes?" I couldn't remember. Probably not since Richard was alive. We spent 3 hours together. Diane taught me about proper foundation garments that actually supported instead of just compressed. She showed me how clothes could enhance instead of disguise. She picked out colors that made my skin glow: deep blues, rich purples, that stunning emerald green. When I looked in the final mirror, wearing a navy dress with tiny pearl buttons and my hair freshly styled at the salon downstairs, I saw someone I'd forgotten existed: Eleanor. Not Michael's mother, not Richard's widow, just Eleanor. The total came to $2,800. 6 months ago, that number would have sent me into a panic attack. But as I handed over Richard's credit card, the one I'd kept active all these years for emergencies, I realized this was an emergency rescue of my own identity. "You look absolutely radiant," the cashier said as she folded my new clothes into beautiful bags with ribbon handles. Radiant. When was the last time anyone had called me radiant? I drove home in my new emerald dress, feeling like a different person, feeling like myself. The phone was ringing when I walked in. I let it ring. It rang 17 times that evening. I counted. Each ring felt like a small victory. The next morning, I woke up at 9 a.m. instead of 6:30. For 40 years, I'd risen early to call Michael before his day began, to check on his schedule, to make sure he had everything he needed. Today, I made coffee in my new china cup, part of the set I'd bought yesterday to replace the chipped, mismatched mugs I'd been using since the Carter administration. I sat in my garden wearing my new robe, silk, not terry cloth, and watched the sun rise over flowers I'd planted but never taken time to actually enjoy. The peace was intoxicating. At 10:47 a.m., Michael appeared at my kitchen door. He didn't knock, just used his key and walked in like he always did. Except this time, I wasn't the same woman he expected to find. "Mom?" He stopped short when he saw me. "You look different." "I feel different," I said, not getting up from my chair. For 40 years, I'd jumped up the moment he arrived, bustling around to make him comfortable, to serve him, to anticipate his needs. Today, I stayed seated. "Your phone's been going straight to voicemail," he said, his voice carrying that familiar edge of irritation when things didn't go according to his expectations. "I turned it off," I said simply. "Why would you turn off your phone? What if there was an emergency?" "Whose emergency?" I asked. "Yours? Jessica's? Because my emergencies never seem to qualify for immediate attention." He flinched. "Good. Mom, about the other night. We need to talk. We're talking now. I mean really talk. About this house, about your future, about what's best for everyone." "What's best for me," I interrupted, "is not being discussed like I'm not in the room anymore." Michael sat down across from me, and I noticed he looked tired, stressed, like someone whose carefully managed world was spinning out of control. "The realtor's sign is going up tomorrow," I said conversationally, sipping my coffee from the good china. "Mom, please. You can't just make life-altering decisions without talking to your family." "My family," I said, setting down my cup with deliberate precision, "spent months making life-altering decisions about me without talking to me. Turnabout is fair play. This is different." "How?" "Because He struggled, searching for words that wouldn't sound as selfish as they were. Because we love you. We want what's best for you. No, I said quietly. You want what's easiest for you. There's a difference. The silence stretched between us. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Patterson next door starting her morning walk, the same routine she'd maintained for 15 years, the same routine I'd been trapped in until this week. Where will you go? Michael asked finally. I don't know yet, I said, and the uncertainty felt thrilling instead of terrifying. Maybe somewhere warm, maybe somewhere with mountains, maybe somewhere no one knows me as anyone's mother or widow or burden. You're not a burden? Michael. I looked directly at him. Stop lying. To me and to yourself. We both know exactly what I've become in your life. He couldn't meet my eyes. I want to make this right, he said finally. How? I don't know. Tell me how. For just a moment, I saw a glimpse of the little boy he used to be, the one who'd crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd held my hand at his father's funeral, who'd once told me I was the strongest person in the world. But then I remembered Jessica's laughter, the nursing home brochure, the way he'd looked away when he saw me at his office. You can't, I said gently. Some things break too completely to be fixed. So that's it? You're just going to disappear? I'm going to live, Michael. For the first time in 40 years, I'm going to live for myself instead of through other people. He left without another word. That afternoon, I did something else I'd never done. I went to a movie by myself, a romantic comedy playing at the theater downtown, the kind of silly film Jessica always dismissed as mindless entertainment for housewives. I bought popcorn and a large soda and sat in the middle of the theater, laughing out loud without worrying about whether I was being too loud or taking up too much space. The couple on screen reminded me of Richard and me when we were young, playful, passionate, full of dreams. When was the last time I'd laughed like that? Really laughed. Not the polite chuckles I offered during family gatherings while Jessica made jokes at my expense. After the movie, I walked through Millennium Park, something I'd driven past thousands of times, but never stopped to explore. Tourists and locals milled around Cloud Gate, taking pictures and pointing at the skyline reflected in its surface. I asked a young couple to take my photo. Just you? The girl asked, looking around for my companions. Just me, I said, and it felt like a declaration of independence. In the photo, I'm standing in front of the sculpture in my emerald dress, my hair catching the late afternoon light, my smile genuine and unguarded. I look like a woman who knows her worth. I look like Eleanor. That evening, I called Carmen to put in an offer on a small condo I'd seen online, a 2-bedroom place in Scottsdale, Arizona, with a view of the mountains and a community pool where retired people actually seemed to enjoy each other's company instead of just enduring it. Are you sure? Carmen asked. You haven't even seen it in person. I'm sure, I said. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. After I hung up, I sat in my garden one last time as the owner of this house. Tomorrow, potential buyers would start walking through, imagining their own lives in these rooms, their own memories in these spaces. And for the first time in months, that didn't make me sad. It made me hopeful. The phone rang once that evening. I glanced at the caller ID, Michael, and let it go to voicemail. But this time, I played the message back. Mom, it's me. I've been thinking about what you said. About what we said. You're right. We haven't been fair to you. I haven't been fair to you. I don't know how to fix this, but I love you. I know I haven't shown it well, but I do love you. Please call me back. His voice cracked on the last word, but I didn't call back. Love wasn't just words. Love was action. Love was respect. Love was showing up when it mattered. Not just when you realized you might lose something valuable. And after 40 years of accepting words instead of actions, I was finally learning the difference. Tomorrow, I would start packing for my new life. Tonight, I would sleep peacefully in the knowledge that I was finally, truly free. The intervention came on a Saturday morning. I was in my kitchen, packing my good china into bubble wrap and humming an old Sinatra song that Richard used to dance with me to when I heard multiple cars in the driveway. Through the window, I watched them coordinate their approach like a military operation. Michael and Jessica in their black BMW, Patricia, Jessica's mother, in her silver Mercedes, and even my sister Margaret, who must have flown in from Florida overnight. They'd called in reinforcements. I continued wrapping my teacups, each one a small treasure I'd collected over the years. Some gifts from Richard, others bought with my own carefully saved money during rare moments of self-indulgence. They clinked softly against each other, a gentle sound that felt like saying goodbye to old friends. The front door opened without a knock. Of course. "Mom?" Michael's voice carried that forced cheerfulness people use when they're about to deliver bad news. "We're here! We brought bagels!" Jessica called out, like this was a social visit instead of an ambush. I heard them gathering in the living room, whispering among themselves. The consultation before the confrontation. "Eleanor!" Margaret's voice boomed from the hallway. "Come out here right now!" Margaret had always been the bossy one, 5 years older and convinced that gave her authority over everyone's life decisions. She'd married well, a successful banker who'd left her comfortable when he died. And she'd never let me forget the difference in our circumstances. I finished wrapping the last teacup, placed it carefully in the box, and walked into the living room. They were arranged like a tribunal. Michael and Jessica on the couch, Patricia in Richard's old recliner, which made my jaw clench, and Margaret standing by the fireplace like a prosecutor about to deliver closing arguments. "Sit down, Eleanor," Margaret commanded. "I'm fine standing," I said, crossing my arms. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Patricia muttered to Jessica. "Stubborn, unreasonable. We're worried about you, Mom," Michael said, his voice dripping with the kind of fake concern that fooled no one. "This isn't like you. How would you know what's like me?" I asked. "When's the last time you paid attention to who I actually am instead of who you need me to be?" "Don't be dramatic," Margaret snapped. "We're here because you're making foolish decisions. Selling your house? Moving across the country? At your age? It's madness. It's my life." "Is it?" Patricia leaned forward, her perfectly manicured fingers steepled. "Because from where I sit, it looks like you're having some kind of breakdown. These impulsive purchases, these radical changes. Have you considered that you might not be thinking clearly?" The implication hung in the air like poison gas. They were questioning my mental competency. "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years," I said evenly. "Eleanor," Margaret said, pulling out a manila folder, "we've done some research. There are excellent facilities right here in Chicago." "Stop." My voice cut through the room like a blade. "Just stop. Mom, please just listen," Michael began. "I have listened." The words exploded out of me. "I've listened for 40 years. I listened when you told me what to cook, where to shop, how to dress, who to be. I listened when you decided I was too old, too embarrassing, too inconvenient for your perfect lives. Well, I'm done listening. You're being irrational," Jessica said, her voice cold. "We're trying to help you. Help me. Or help yourselves to my house once I'm safely locked away somewhere you don't have to think about me." The silence that followed was deafening. "That's not—" Michael started. "Did you think I was stupid?" I continued, my voice gaining strength. "Did you think I didn't know that you've been counting on inheriting this house? Planning your future around my death? Mom, that's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed, and it sounded bitter even to my own ears. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been including me in the Disney trip instead of lying about the space. Fair would have been visiting me when I had cancer instead of calling twice in 6 months. Fair would have been treating me like a human being instead of a burden to be managed." Margaret rolled her eyes. "You're being melodramatic. So they went on vacation without you. So what? You're not entitled to be included in everything." "You're right," I said quietly. "I'm not entitled to anything, which is why I'm taking control of my own life instead of waiting for scraps of affection from people who clearly don't want me around." "We do want you around," Michael's voice cracked. "We just think, you think I should disappear quietly. You think I should go to some facility where other people can deal with me so you can get back to your real lives without the inconvenience of an aging mother." "That's not true," Jessica said, but she couldn't meet my eyes. "Isn't it? Then tell me, Jessica, when's the last time you called me just to talk? When's the last time you invited me to lunch? When's the last time you included me in any decision about my own granddaughter's life?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. "That's what I thought. Look, Patricia said, clearly losing patience. The bottom line is that you're making decisions that affect the whole family. This house has sentimental value. To who? I challenged. Michael hasn't lived here in over 20 years. Sophia barely acknowledges this place exists. The only person with sentimental attachment to this house is me, and I'm the one selling it. But where will we have family gatherings? Jessica asked, as if this was a reasonable concern. What family gatherings? The ones where I cook for hours while you scroll through your phones? The ones where you treat me like the help? We don't, Michael began. You do, I said firmly. You absolutely do. And I've enabled it for so long that you don't even see it anymore. Margaret pulled out another paper from her folder. I've spoken to Dr. Hoffman. You've spoken to my doctor? I felt the blood drain from my face. I called to express concerns about your mental state. These impulsive decisions, this sudden personality change. It could be early dementia, medication side effects, any number of age-related issues that affect judgment. The room tilted. They'd gone behind my back to my doctor. They were building a case to have me declared incompetent. I've scheduled you an appointment for Monday, Margaret continued. A full cognitive assessment, just to make sure you're capable of making these kinds of decisions. Get out. My voice was deadly quiet. Eleanor, get out! I roared, surprising everyone, including myself. Get out of my house. All of you. Mom, please. Michael stood up, reaching for me. Don't touch me. I backed away from him. Don't you dare touch me after what you've done. We're trying to protect you, he shouted back. From what? From being happy? From having choices? From living my own life? From making mistakes you'll regret? The only mistake I regret is wasting 40 years of my life trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Patricia gasped. Jessica's mouth fell open. Margaret looked like I'd slapped her. But Michael just looked broken. You don't mean that, he whispered. I mean every word, I said, my voice steady now. You had a mother who would have done anything for you, who did do everything for you, and you threw it away because it wasn't convenient anymore. We can fix this, Jessica started. No, I shook my head. You can't. Because fixing this would require you to see me as a person instead of a problem. And you've proven you're not capable of that. I walked to the front door and held it open. Leave. Now. And don't come back unless you're invited. This is our house too, Patricia began. No, I said firmly. This is my house. My name is on the deed. My money bought it. My marriage built it. And you are no longer welcome here. They filed out slowly, Margaret muttering about ungrateful and making a scene. Jessica whispered something to Michael about getting a lawyer. Patricia shook her head like I was a misbehaving child. Michael was the last to leave. He paused in the doorway, looking back at me with something that might have been real emotion. I love you, Mom, he said quietly. I know you do, I replied. But your love comes with so many conditions that it doesn't feel like love anymore. It feels like a transaction. After they left, I sat in my empty living room and cried. Not from sadness, but from exhaustion. From the sheer emotional drain of finally standing up for myself after decades of being pushed down. Then I picked up the phone and called Carmen. I want to accept the offer on the Arizona condo, I said. And I want to expedite the sale of this house, whatever it takes. Eleanor, are you sure? That's a lot of changes very quickly. I'm sure, I said, looking around at the house that no longer felt like home. It's time to go. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I called a locksmith. I need all the locks changed, I told him. Tonight, if possible. Emergency call out on a Saturday night costs extra, he warned. I don't care what it costs, I said. I need this done now. After he left, I sat in my newly secure home and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. No one could walk into my space uninvited anymore. No one could ambush me with interventions and ultimatums. No one could threaten my autonomy or question my competency. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly free, and I was never going back. The house sold in 3 weeks. Carmen called me on a Tuesday morning, her voice bright with amazement. Eleanor, you're not going to believe this. We have a bidding war. 3 families want your house, and they're all offering above asking price. I was sitting in my garden wearing one of my new dresses, a soft lavender one that made me feel like spring itself, drinking coffee from my good china and watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "How much above?" I asked, though I realized with surprise that I didn't really care. For the first time in my life, money wasn't the driving force behind my decisions. 40,000 over asking. The winning family is young. He's a teacher, she's a nurse, they have twin toddlers. They fell in love with your garden. "Good," I said, touching the petals of a rose Richard had planted for our 15th anniversary. "It deserves a family who'll appreciate it. When do you want to close?" "As soon as possible." The next month passed in a blur of activity that felt like the most alive I'd been in decades. I donated most of my furniture to charity, keeping only a few pieces that held real meaning. Richard's reading chair, my grandmother's sewing table, the kitchen table where Michael had done his homework, and I'd planned our lives around his needs. I gave away boxes of books to the local library, keeping only my favorites. The poetry collections Richard used to read to me, the mystery novels that had kept me company during lonely evenings, the travel guides I'd collected over the years but never used because there was always something Michael needed instead. But the most liberating moment came when I stood in front of my bedroom closet, looking at 20 years of beige, navy, and sensible brown clothes. Without hesitation, I loaded them all into garbage bags for donation. "Are you sure about this?" my neighbor Mrs. Patterson asked, helping me carry bags to my car. "Some of these still have tags on them." "That's exactly why I'm sure," I said. I bought clothes to disappear in. Now I want to be seen. The Arizona condo was everything the pictures had promised, and more. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen with windows that looked out onto mountains that changed color with the light, a small balcony where I could have my morning coffee and watch the sunrise without anyone needing anything from me. But most importantly, it was mine. Completely, unequivocally mine. I chose paint colors. Warm terracotta for the living room, soft sage green for the bedroom, sunny yellow for the kitchen because it made me happy just to look at it. I bought furniture that I loved instead of furniture that was practical. A velvet sofa in deep blue because it felt luxurious against my skin. An antique desk where I could write letters or read or simply sit and think my own thoughts. For the first time in 40 years, every decision was mine alone. The retirement community was a revelation. I'd expected the kind of grim institutional atmosphere that characterized the nursing homes Michael had shown me. Instead, I found a vibrant community of people who were actively living, not just waiting to die. There was Helen, a former Broadway dancer who taught yoga on Tuesday mornings, and still moved with the grace of someone who'd spent her life in motion. Frank, a retired professor who organized book clubs and had read more novels than I'd even heard of. Maria, a woman my age who'd never married and spoke 5 languages because she'd spent her retirement traveling the world. "Welcome to the land of the living," Maria said when I introduced myself at the community center. "What brings you to our little slice of paradise?" "Escape," I said honestly. She laughed, a rich, warm sound. "Honey, we're all escapees here. The question is, what are you escaping to?" I didn't have an answer then, but I found one over the following weeks. I was escaping to myself. At Helen's yoga class, I discovered that my 73-year-old body was more capable than I'd given it credit for. Years of arthritis pain that I'd accepted as inevitable began to ease as I learned to move with intention instead of just enduring movement. "You're holding trauma in your shoulders," Helen observed during one session, her hands gentle on my tense muscles. "Your body has been braced for impact for so long it forgot how to relax." She was right. I'd been tense for years, always waiting for the next crisis, the next demand, the next time someone would need me to sacrifice something for their benefit. At Frank's book club, I rediscovered my love of literature. We were reading The Awakening by Kate Chopin, and when we discussed Edna's realization that she'd been living for others instead of herself, I felt like the author was speaking directly to me across more than a century. "What do you think about Edna's choice?" Frank asked during our discussion. "I think," I said slowly, "that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself." The other members nodded, and I realized I was surrounded by people who understood what it meant to claim your own life. But the most surprising discovery came when Maria invited me to her Spanish conversation group. I took Spanish in high school, I protested. That was 55 years ago. So? Your brain didn't expire when you turned 70. Come on, it'll be fun. It was more than fun. It was transformative. Sitting in Maria's sunny living room, struggling to remember conjugations and pronunciation, I felt my mind awakening in ways it hadn't in years. The other students, all retirees learning new languages for the joy of it, welcomed me with the kind of warmth I'd forgotten existed. ¿Cómo te llamas? Maria asked me during my first class. Me llamo Eleanor, I said, and then, surprising myself, I added, Soy una mujer libre. I am a free woman. The words felt like a prayer, like a declaration, like a promise to myself. That evening, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold, and I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Eleanor? My college roommate Sarah's voice was surprised, but warm. My God! Where have you been? We'd lost touch gradually over the decades, the way friendships sometimes do when life pulls people in different directions. She'd married a diplomat and lived all over the world. I'd married Richard and devoted myself to raising Michael. I've been lost, I said honestly, but I think I'm found now. We talked for 2 hours, about her adventures in foreign countries, about books we'd read, about the dreams we'd shared when we were young and thought anything was possible. You sound different, she said near the end of our conversation. Lighter, happier. I am, I realized. For the first time in decades, I actually am. Come visit me, she said suddenly. I'm in Santa Fe now. It's beautiful here, and we could pick up where we left off. I'd love that, I said, meaning it completely. After we hung up, I did something I hadn't done since Richard died. I planned a trip for the pure joy of it. Not to visit family, not to fulfill obligations, but because I wanted to see a friend and explore a new place. The woman who made these plans, buying plane tickets, researching hotels, choosing clothes for the pure pleasure of looking beautiful, felt like someone I was meeting for the first time. She felt like Eleanor. Not Michael's mother or Richard's widow or anyone's burden or disappointment. Just Eleanor. The phone calls from Chicago had stopped after the second week. No more voicemails from Michael. No more guilt trips from Margaret. No more attempts at manipulation. Part of me wondered if they even cared that I was gone, or if they were just relieved not to have to deal with me anymore. But mostly, I found I didn't care either way. My new life was too full of possibility to waste time mourning people who'd never valued what they had. 3 months after leaving Chicago, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop in Scottsdale, reading a novel in Spanish with the help of a dictionary, when my phone rang. The caller ID said, Sophia, my granddaughter, who hadn't called me in over 2 years. I almost didn't answer, but something, curiosity maybe, or the ghost of hope, made me pick up. Grandma? Her voice was tentative, uncertain. Hello, Sophia. I got your address from Dad. I hope that's okay. It's fine. A pause. Then, I miss you. 3 words. Simple words, but they landed in my chest like a small miracle. I miss you too, sweetheart. Could I maybe come visit you? During spring break? I know you're probably busy and I know things are weird with Dad and Mom, but I closed my eyes, feeling something crack open in my chest. Not the painful kind of breaking I'd experienced so much of lately, but the kind that lets light in. I would love that, I said. I would absolutely love that. Really? Really. We have a lot of catching up to do. After we hung up, I sat in the Arizona sunshine, surrounded by the chatter of people living their lives, and felt something I'd almost forgotten existed. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. The woman who'd been erased so gradually that she'd almost disappeared entirely was finally coming back to life, and she was beautiful. Sophia arrived on a Tuesday in March, stepping off the plane at Phoenix Sky Harbor, with the hesitant posture of someone unsure of her welcome. She was 18 now, legally an adult, but still carrying herself like the uncertain teenager who'd been taught to see me as an embarrassment rather than a grandmother. I barely recognized her at first. She'd grown taller, her dark hair longer, her face more defined. But when she saw me waiting at arrivals, wearing my turquoise dress and the silver jewelry I'd bought myself for my birthday, Her face broke into a smile that reminded me of the little girl who used to beg for bedtime stories. "Grandma!" She ran toward me, her backpack bouncing, and threw her arms around me in a hug that felt like coming home and starting over all at once. "Look at you," I said, holding her at arm's length. "You're beautiful, sweetheart. Absolutely beautiful." "So are you," she said, and I could see she meant it. "You look different. Happy." "I am happy," I said, surprising myself with how true it was. "Come on, let me show you my new home." The drive through Scottsdale gave us time to ease into conversation. Sophia admired the mountains, exclaimed over the desert flowers blooming along the roadsides, asked about my neighbors and my Spanish classes and my yoga practice with the curiosity of someone genuinely interested in the answers. "Mom said you were having some kind of crisis," she said as we pulled into my complex. "But this doesn't look like a crisis. This looks like an adventure." "Sometimes," I said, "what looks like a crisis to other people is actually a rescue." My condo delighted her. She explored every room, admiring my new furniture, laughing at the photos I'd hung of my Arizona friends, running her fingers along the spines of my Spanish textbooks. "You're really learning Spanish?" she asked. "Por qué no?" I said, and when she looked confused, I translated, "Why not?" "That's so cool, Grandma. I'm taking Spanish at school, but I'm terrible at it." "We can practice together," I offered, "if you want." That first evening, we sat on my balcony sharing takeout from a Mexican restaurant and watching the sunset paint the mountains in impossible shades of pink and gold. For the first time in years, conversation with one of my family members felt natural, unforced, genuine. "Dad's been different since you left," Sophia said eventually, picking at her enchiladas. "Different how?" "Sad. Angry. He keeps saying he doesn't understand what happened, but Mom told him it was probably for the best anyway." That made him even angrier. I felt a familiar tug of guilt, the old instinct to protect Michael from emotional discomfort. But I'd learned to recognize that impulse now, and I didn't act on it. "What do you think?" I asked instead. Sophia was quiet for a long time, watching a hawk circle overhead. "I think," she said finally, "that we took you for granted. I think we got so used to you always being there, always saying yes, always putting us first, that we forgot you were a real person with your own feelings." The honesty in her voice took my breath away. "When did you realize that?" I asked gently. "When you weren't there anymore," she said simply. "When I came home from school and there was no smell of dinner cooking, no grandmother asking about my day, no safe place to go when Mom and Dad were fighting about money or work or whatever they fight about." "I'm sorry you felt that loss." "No," she interrupted. "Don't apologize. You shouldn't have to apologize for taking care of yourself." We sat in comfortable silence as the sky deepened from pink to purple to indigo. "Grandma," she said eventually, "can I ask you something?" "Anything. Are you ever going to forgive them? Dad and Mom, I mean?" It was the question I'd been avoiding for months. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Forgiveness isn't something you can force. It has to grow naturally, like trust. And trust takes time to rebuild." "What would it take? For you to trust them again?" I considered this, watching the first stars appear in the clear desert sky. "It would take them treating me like a person instead of a problem," I said. "It would take them showing respect for my choices, even when those choices inconvenience them. It would take them understanding that love isn't about control." "That's a lot to ask for," Sophia said. "It's the minimum requirement for any healthy relationship," I replied. I just forgot that for a while. The week Sophia spent with me was a revelation. Away from her parents' influence, she blossomed into someone I'd never had the chance to know. Funny, thoughtful, curious about the world. We took Spanish lessons together with Maria, went hiking in the desert with Helen, spent hours talking about books and dreams and the future she was planning for herself. "I got into Northwestern," she told me on her third day, her voice carefully neutral. "Sophia, that's wonderful. When did you find out?" "Last month. Dad's alma mater, you know. He was so proud." Something in her tone made me look at her more carefully. "But?" I prompted. "But I also got into UC San Diego for marine biology, which is what I actually want to study." "And?" And Dad says Northwestern is more prestigious, better for my future. Marine biology is too specialized and limits my options. I felt a familiar anger rising, not at Sophia, but at the pattern repeating itself. Michael, trying to control his daughter's choices the way he'd tried to control mine. "What do you want to do?" I asked. "I want to study the ocean," she said simply. "I want to understand how coral reefs work and why they're dying, and maybe figure out how to save them. I've wanted that since I was 12, but everyone keeps telling me it's not practical." "Practical for who?" She looked at me with surprise, like no one had ever asked that question before. "I don't know," she said. "For them, I guess." "Sophia," I said, taking her hands, "you're 18 years old. You're about to start the only life you'll ever have. Don't waste it trying to live up to someone else's definition of success." "But Dad will be so disappointed. Your father has had his life," I said firmly. "This is yours." That evening, she called her parents. I could hear Michael's voice through the phone, loud and insistent, when she told him about her decision to choose UC San Diego. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was familiar. That combination of anger and guilt that had been his primary tool for controlling the women in his life. When she hung up, there were tears in her eyes. "He says I'm making a huge mistake," she said. "He says I'm throwing away opportunities he sacrificed to give me." "Sound familiar?" I asked gently. She nodded, understanding immediately. "How did you finally stop caring what he thought?" she asked. "I realized that his opinion of my choices mattered less than my own happiness," I said. "And that took me 73 years to figure out. You're smarter than I was." The day before Sophia left, we were sitting by the community pool when my phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen. I'd been expecting this call all week. "Hi, Michael." "Mom." His voice was tight with controlled emotion. "How's Sophia's visit going?" "It's been wonderful. She's a remarkable young woman. I'm sure she's told you about her college decision." "She has. And I suppose you think I'm wrong to want what's best for her." I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. "I think you want what feels safest to you," I said. "But safety and happiness aren't always the same thing." "She's 18, Mom. She doesn't know what she wants." "She's 18, I agreed. "The same age you were when you decided you wanted to be a doctor. Did you know what you wanted then?" Silence. "That's different," he said finally. "How?" Because I was different. More focused, more mature. Or because you were male and she's female, and you trusted your own judgment in ways you don't trust hers?" More silence. "I miss you, Mom," he said suddenly, his voice breaking. "I know I screwed up. I know we all did. But I miss you." My heart clenched. Despite everything, despite all the hurt and anger and disappointment, he was still my son. The little boy who'd held my hand at his father's funeral. The teenager who'd cried in my arms when his first girlfriend broke his heart. "I miss you too," I said honestly. Is there a way to fix this?" "I don't know," I said. "But if there is, it starts with respecting the choices the women in your life make for themselves, even when those choices scare you." That night, Sophia and I sat on my balcony one last time, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the stars emerge in the clear desert sky. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For what?" "For showing me what it looks like to choose yourself, for proving that it's never too late to start over." "You're not starting over," I said. "You're just starting. That's the gift of being 18. You get to build your life from scratch, with all the wisdom you've gathered and none of the mistakes you haven't made yet." "Will you come to my graduation? From high school or from college?" "Both. All of them. Everything. If you want me there, I'll be there. Even if Dad's there too?" "Even then." As I drove her to the airport the next morning, Sophia turned to me with that serious expression that reminded me so much of her grandfather. "Grandma," she said, "I'm going to UC San Diego." "Good," I said simply. "And I'm going to study marine biology." "Even better. And someday I'm going to save the coral reefs." "I believe you will." 6 months later, I received a call from Michael. Not a guilt trip or an ultimatum or an attempt at manipulation. An invitation. "We're having a going-away party for Sophia," he said, "before she leaves for college. She specifically asked me to invite you. Will I be welcome?" I asked. "You're my mother," he said quietly. "You'll always be welcome. I I needed time to understand that being welcome and being controlled aren't the same thing. I flew back to Chicago for the party, not as the woman who'd left, desperate, diminished, disappearing, but as Eleanor, the woman who'd learned to choose herself. The gathering was small, held in Michael's backyard. Jessica was polite, but distant. Patricia wasn't there at all. But Michael looked at me differently, with something that might have been respect. "You look good, Mom," he said when I arrived. "Happy. I am happy. I'm glad." He paused, struggling with words. "I'm sorry, for all of it, for not seeing you, for not valuing you, for taking you for granted until you were gone." "I know you are," I said. "Can you forgive me?" I looked at my son, really looked at him. He was older than when I'd left, grayer around the temples, lines of worry etched around his eyes. He looked like a man who'd learned something difficult about himself and was trying to do better. "I'm working on it," I said honestly. "Forgiveness is a process, not a destination." He nodded, accepting this. Later, as Sophia opened gifts and laughed with her friends, Michael sat beside me on the porch swing where I used to rock him to sleep when he was small. "I was so afraid of losing control," he said quietly. "Of you, of her, of everything. I thought if I managed everyone's choices, I could protect them from making mistakes." "But you can't protect people from their own lives," I said. "You can only love them through whatever choices they make." "When did you get so wise?" "When I finally started living for myself instead of through other people." We sat in comfortable silence, watching our granddaughter celebrate her future. "She's going to study marine biology," he said eventually. "I know. She'll be wonderful at it." "You're right. She will." It wasn't forgiveness yet, not complete reconciliation, but it was a beginning. As I prepared to return to Arizona, Sophia hugged me tightly at the airport. "Will you teach me more Spanish when I visit at Christmas?" she asked. "Por supuesto," I said. "Of course." "What does soy una mujer libre mean?" she asked suddenly. I smiled, remembering the moment in Maria's living room when I'd first spoken those words. "I am a free woman," I translated. "Teach me to say I am a free woman in Spanish," she said. "Soy una mujer libre." "Soy una mujer libre," she repeated carefully. "Perfect," I said. "Remember that. Always remember that you have the right to be free." Flying back to Arizona, watching the country spread out beneath me like a map of possibilities, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The woman who'd broken down in her kitchen 6 months ago, surrounded by the wreckage of a life she'd built around other people's needs, felt like someone from another lifetime. I'd learned that it's never too late to rescue yourself, that love without respect isn't really love at all, that the most radical thing a woman can do is choose her own happiness. And I'd learned that sometimes the best gift you can give the people you love is showing them what it looks like to value yourself. 6 months from now, Sophia would start college studying something she was passionate about. 5 years from now, maybe she'd be swimming with coral reefs in distant oceans. 10 years from now, perhaps she'd be saving them. And someday, maybe she'd tell her own daughter about the grandmother who disappeared one day and came back as herself. That would be enough. More than enough. That would be everything. Have you ever felt invisible in your own life? Have you ever realized you were living for everyone except yourself? If this story touched something in you, please share it in the comments. If you found hope in Eleanor's journey, leave a like and subscribe so this message can reach someone else who needs to remember their worth. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply choose ourselves.